Barronelle, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
You may have noticed we are off of 14th Street where the rainbow flag flies all year round here. We are next to the Whitman Walker Health Clinic. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to a thoughtful conversation. It's an important one.
Sure.
I will start actually with a version of Rachel's last question. In yesterday's oral arguments, we did keep hearing, and particularly Justice Sotomayor kept on pressing on this question. Where is the line? If the case will be made about freedom of expression, if the case is that crafting this custom design, this sculpture made of flour and sugar, is an expressive act that should be protected, then what act of commerce is not a creative act? What act of commerce is not an expressive act that should be protected? What is the answer to that question? What distinguishes particularly a custom-designed cake, baking a custom-designed cake, from a chef making a delicious plate of barbecue?
Sure. Well, the first thing I think that's important to point out is that the First Amendment itself protects speech. We didn't invent the fact that the First Amendment protects speech and expression. And so the question is,
what is speech?
What is speech? And so the Supreme Court has looked at a number of things over the years. The Supreme Court has looked at, does it express something? But also, is it analogous to something that the court has already recognized as protected speech? And so those are some factors that we think are at play in this case. And so when you're making a custom wedding cake, a multi-tiered, highly stylized cake, we do believe that it is akin to a sculpture. Obviously, it's made of flour, as you said, but it is something that is highly stylized and is made to celebrate a particular event. And so that's one thing courts look to. Another thing courts look to is they look to whether the primary purpose is expressive and artistic, or whether the primary purpose is functional or utilitarian.
But reasonable people can disagree about that, can't they? In both of those questions, I walk into Jose Andres' restaurant, and he has crafted for me this plate, this dish that's on offer on the menu that is this masterpiece of it's an aioli, and it expresses longing and regret. And I ask for that cake on a date with my partner, and he says, "I'm sorry, I don't think that I can serve you this dish." How would that not be a protected act?
I simply don't see how serving food is expressive, and I think that is very different from the creation of a custom cake, the creation of a custom cake to celebrate a marriage. But it also is important to keep in mind that, this case we have two First Amendment claims. And so the one that we're talking about is a freedom of expression, artistic freedom claim, but there's also a claim involving free exercise of religion. And so that's another claim that's important and is at the heart of this case.
We'll come back to that one. Barronelle, now you own a flower shop.
Yes, sir.
In Washington State, Arlene's Flowers. And you've made a similar argument about the act of crafting a flower arrangement. And I want to walk through a scenario with you. So I walk into your shop with a photograph of a bouquet, a gorgeous bouquet that you crafted for my dear friend's wedding. And I say, "Barronelle, please make me one of these for my wedding." What happens next?
Well, I sit down with you. I find out.
Oh.
I'm sorry, talk really soft.
Is the microphone off in this case also?
Hello.
Oh, all right. Try this one.
Testing 1, 2. Okay, better? Okay. I sit down with you, and you're a bride, and I find out all about you. I find out how you met. I find out what colors you like. I find out how you got engaged, how you want to, what do you want the message to be in your wedding. I find out your favorite flowers. I spend weeks, sometimes years, with you planning this, and then once that's done, and I make your bouquet. Then I go to the wedding, and I service the wedding. I help the bride get dressed, sometimes also a button on a tux. I greet the guest. I calm the parents, and then I have the bride and groom walk out of that.
That sounds lovely. Forget the bride for a moment. I don't need the tux service, but I just want the bouquet. It's beautiful, and I just want one of these at my wedding. Can you make one for me?
Yes, if the
No, I have
marriage is
none in
between
my
a man
hand.
and a woman, I can. Because my faith teaches me that marriage is between a
have
man
none
and a
in
woman.
my
It has nothing to do with the person or the sexual orientation. It has to do with my faith.
But why do I have to volunteer that information, Barronelle?
You
Can
don't.
I not buy the bouquet, merely ask you to craft me this beautiful sculpture in service of love? Oh, one moment.
Excuse us? Okay.
Why must I out myself to purchase this arrangement?
Well, I think what's important in this case, and when we're talking about Barronelle's case, I think it's important that we stick to the facts of her case, which is she had served this gentleman for 9 years. She considered him a friend. They had worked together, and this was something that when he came in and asked her to create the custom arrangements for her for his wedding, it was something that she knew the circumstances, and so I think that your situation is different.
Well, okay, so yesterday in an interview with, the Daily published an interview with Jack Phillips, and he described the fateful interaction at Masterpiece Cake Shop this way. He said, 2 gentlemen came into my shop. They had a folder with them and had my wedding books open, and so I went over and sat down with them, introduced myself, we exchanged names, and they said, we're here to look for wedding cakes, and it's for our wedding. And so I tried to respectfully explain to them that, I'm sorry guys, I don't do cakes for same-sex weddings. That was the encounter as he described it. And in that encounter, the couple revealed themselves. That encounter, what he described, and the thing that led him to say, I'm sorry, I won't make this cake for you, was not a, what would you like the cake to be question. It was a, who is this cake for question. And that's the question that you would have asked me, Barronelle, in our hypothetical exchange. Well, tell me about your bride. That sounds very much like a who you are question. It sounds like you're asking a question so that you can make a decision about what type of customer you want to serve.
And
how is that not the
Sure,
case?
I would disagree with that because it's a question of what am I being asked to create art to celebrate. It's a question of tell me about this event that I'm going to be putting my heart and my soul and my artistic expression into.
But why is that important if you've made this beautiful arrangement? If I'm not asking you to say anything particular, I'm fine with the message. I merely want this gorgeous thing that you have made, this gorgeous floral sculpture that you have put into the world.
Well, I think what's important there is that context matters. Context changes the meaning of things. And so if you're celebrating one event, you're celebrating one message, versus if you're celebrating another event, it's a different message.
So if this case enshrines the standard that you're hoping it does, what is to prevent all sorts of businesses from declining to serve an LGBTQ clientele? So who's to say that lawyers, for example, wouldn't be able to serve gay, lesbian, bi, trans individuals?
So the test that we've put to the court, we believe is very clear. The first question is there speech? And we've talked about that already. But the second question is the reason why you're declining this request because of the message of the speech or because of the person who's asking it? And so if somebody just says, well, what I do is speech, but I refuse to speak for all African Americans, or I refuse to speak for all women, that is something that wouldn't be protected under our theory because that is a person-based objection. Our theory only would protect a message-based objection.
Jim, has the Alliance Defense Fund, your organization, campaigned against the American Bar Association's anti-discrimination rule on the grounds that it would censor lawyers' speech?
So there's a proposed rule. It's Rule 8.4 of the bar, of the ABA's model code, and I don't know exactly all the positions that we've taken, but I do know that we are very concerned that it would require lawyers to take cases and advocate for causes that would violate their convictions. And that's something that's deeply unsettling, not only to our legal organization, but a lot of legal organizations. But that's, again, I think the key point is, it's different to say, I don't want to advocate for a cause, than to say, I don't want to represent an individual. And that's the concern that we have.
But isn't that another indication of anti-discrimination? So one argument that's being made here is that what is under attack, what is under threat in this case, is actually the principle of anti-discrimination laws. That Colorado has made this choice to enshrine. It is selected as a state. It has said, we would like to establish a principle that says that our businesses can't discriminate against any clients on the basis of their sexual orientation. And in that context and in this, if the ADF is against anti-discrimination rules, then what does that suggest for anti-discrimination and for your beliefs about discriminatory behavior?
I think it's wrong to say that the ADF is against anti-discrimination. I think the ADF is against an overexpanded reading that would force people to speak messages and to promote ideas that conflict with their beliefs. And so in this case, again, the argument that we're making would not allow any kind of person-based discrimination. It would only allow what we call message-based decisions that say, this is not a message that I want to promote. But the other thing that's important to keep in mind about these cases, and you were talking about what's at stake. Well, one of the principles that's at stake is, what are we going to do with people like Barronelle and like Jack Phillips who believe that marriage is a union of a man and a woman? Are we going to take them as part of society and to force them to the margins and not welcome them in public life? Or are we going to allow them to live out their beliefs? And I would like to I would like to believe that we can find a compromise on that.
One moderator for this interview, if you would. You'll get a chance to ask some questions. Barronelle.
May I tell you about my relationship with Rob?
Please do.
Okay. Rob is one of my favorite customers. I waited for Rob for almost 10 years. I knew Rob was gay. It was never an issue. What I liked about Rob was his creativity and his imagination. And one of the things that really drew us together was the way he treated his employees and his staff. And I thought that was so great because he was always so gracious to them. I custom designed flowers for Rob for anniversaries, for birthdays, for parties. And he would always come in and pick out a different vase, a usual container, and he'd say, do your thing, which I love because I got to work out of the box and make something really different and unique for him. He loved my arrangements, and I loved doing them for Rob. He had been in a couple of times before and told the girls that he was getting married and he wanted to talk to me. So when I found that out, I went home and I talked to my husband, and I said, what do we do here? I don't want to hurt Rob's feelings. I think the world of him. How do I graciously tell him that I cannot do his wedding because of my faith? So when Rob came in to talk to me about his wedding, before he got too far, I just put my hands on Rob's and I said, Rob, I'm sorry. I can't do your wedding because of my relationship with Jesus Christ. He said, I understand. He said, my mom feels that way. I'm hoping she'll walk me down the aisle. We talked about how we got engaged, why they decided to be married. We talked for a while. He asked me if I would recommend another florist, which I did 3, which I knew would do him a good job. And Robin and I hugged each other, and he left. His partner put something on Facebook that basically said, I have every right to believe the way I do, but I hurt their feelings. The Washington State Attorney General picked that up off of social media without any complaint from Robin Kurd. Sent me a letter saying, you will do same-sex marriages, you will donate $5,000 to the gay and lesbian youth group, and I'll forget the whole thing. The ACLU got a hold of Rob and Kurt, and they also sued us personally and corporately. If Rob walked into my shop tomorrow, I would hug him, catch up on his life, and wait on him for another 10 years. I miss Rob, and I never intended to hurt him in any way. Rob and Kurt have every right to live the way they consistently feel and with their faith. And I am only asking for the same thing.
Now, Barronelle, I respect the depth of that expression and the depth of that belief. At the same time, you know, my mind harkens back to a few decades ago in one of the lower court rulings leading up to Loving versus Virginia. There was an individual in the case. One of the trial lawyers argued the almighty God, he created the races, yellow, black, red, and Malay, because it was a different time. He said, I don't believe, earnestly, there are people who do not believe in miscegenation, in interracial marriage. And so why should I, at my lunch counter, be compelled to serve a black and white couple a meal that I have crafted with my hands? And do you agree, do you believe that that restaurant owners should not have to serve that meal?
That strikes me as a
Question. I would love, Barronelle, I would love to hear.
well, Barronelle's here to tell her story, and the legal questions I'm here to answer those.
But this was a question about belief, though. And Barronelle, you just told us a story about belief, and I'm curious how you feel about that scenario.
In this situation, I think it's pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear.
All right, mansplain for me, Jim. Come on, let's do it.
So our position in this litigation has always been that opposition to interracial marriage is an opposition to the race of the individuals. A belief that marriage is a union of a man and a woman is not based at all on animosity towards anyone in the gay or lesbian community. It's simply a belief that people throughout generations have held, including people in the Judeo-Christian tradition,
Jim,
the Muslim tradition.
I would love, though, in that scenario, if I am a cook and I believe that this creative act of making a meal, which is creative, that it would violate my religious expression, my religious belief, and my freedom of expression, then do you believe that should not be compelled by the state?
We, as I laid out before, our theory is that it only protects decisions that are not based on who a person is. And in this instance, the example you gave, I believe that's based on who a person is and what their race is. In the circumstances of Barronelle's and Jack's case, they're happy to serve everyone. They just can't do something that celebrates a view of marriage in conflict with their faith.
So let me ask you another line of questioning that is more fully in the legal domain. So Justice Scalia, may he rest in peace, in Lawrence, in Windsor, in Obergefell, in the cases that have built the foundation for same-sex marriage, Scalia consistently said, the states have made a choice. They have crafted laws. In our laboratory in the United States, in America's laboratory of democracy, they have crafted laws that express what each state believes it should be the case, should be the standard. And shouldn't the states be allowed to have those standards? Shouldn't those standards be protected by the federal government? And shouldn't the federal government take very seriously intruding on a standard that the state has decided that it stands behind? And in this case, hasn't the state of Colorado decided to stand behind the principle of non-discrimination as the state defines it, including sexual orientation? And why should that be contravened by the Supreme Court?
Well, I think because there's First Amendment rights, and First Amendment rights can't be trumped by state laws. And so an example would be in the Obergefell case that was advocating for same-sex marriage. One of the arguments that the states made was exactly what you talked about, which is we should allow states to sort this out for themselves. But the response for the same-sex couples who were bringing those cases was that you can't allow states' decisions to override constitutional rights, and that's exactly what we're arguing here.
So I can keep going, but I would like to allow a couple questions from the audience.
Oh, thank you. Hi, my name is Sarah Massey, and I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community. Thank you. And I just want to make sure that everyone in this room knows this, and everyone watching live knows this. The Alliance Defending Freedom is a hate group.
Sarah, please question.
I'm asking a question. This has been designated by the Southern Poverty
Sarah,
Law Center.
Please, your question.
I'm asking, why is this organization prominently attacking LGBTQ Americans? Thank you.
And I would say that, Sarah, we're not attacking anyone. We're standing up for the rights of individuals of all faiths to live out their beliefs.
A question over here. Oh, sorry, question over here.
Thank you. My question is this. I respect your religious opinion. I'm unaware of anything that Christ has said about gay marriage. But if you're citing Old Testament, like Deuteronomy, what other prescriptions in the Bible that you refuse to service people? Would you, for say, refuse to make flowers for a woman who fails to be submissive to her husband?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
All right, so what other prescriptions in the Bible would you fail, or would you use to deny service to a customer? Such as, would you fail to, or would you deny making flowers for a woman who fails to be submissive to her husband?
I didn't deny anybody's service at any time. I waited for Rob for almost 10 years. It's not the service I deny, it's the event.
So I want to ask, come back to the question that I began this with, where's the line? But Barronelle, I want to point this question at you. A big part of the arguments yesterday, our colleague Kristen Wagoner, who made the arguments before the Supreme Court, said that really it is the construction of this distinctive sculpture that is protected in this case. It would not be a pre-made bouquet. It does not apply to cooks. It doesn't even apply to makeup artists. Now, Barronelle, within your craft, is there a line? How would you articulate the line between a creative act, an act of expression, and a product that you've made?
Well, if you come in for a birthday bouquet or an anniversary bouquet or whatever type of bouquet, that's fine. I'm not there to judge you, nor am I there to judge Rob and Kurt. But when I create something that is you, like in funeral work, when somebody passes away and I find out about their grandfather, he liked to fish or he liked to hunt, then I make that sympathy piece with a fishing pond or fishing pole and a fishing pond with a fish. That's Grandpa. And when they can come in and look at that and go, they burst into tears, they go, that's Grandpa, then that's what I create. And that's what I create for bride and groom, is something that expresses them.
And one thing Barronelle's always been clear about in her case is that she's happy to sell, it's similar to in the Masterpiece case, she's happy to sell all her pre-made stuff to anyone. That's never been a question.
Well, Barronelle, Jim, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Our next